In episode 18 of Mobycast, Chris leads a DockerCon session roll-up. In particular, we discuss securing container-based deployments. Welcome to Mobycast, a weekly conversation about containerization, Docker, and modern software deployment. Let's jump right in.
What have you been up to this week, Chris?
This week I'm back on the ground after a couple weeks of traveling, going back and forth between Seattle and San Francisco. So kind of back in the office and getting back to a bit more of a normal schedule.
Excellent. Nice to have you back and available for my everyday questions and queries over Slack. And how about you, Rich? What have you been up to this week?
So I'm leaving for vacation a week from today, heading back home to spend some time on the beach, and been thinking a lot about how this is probably the first time that I've been a week away from vacation and haven't been scrambling to get all the things done, which I guess is just like sort of like a hat tip to, putting process together and actually seeing them work out. So it's a weird feeling because I'm sort of like, what am I missing? I'm so used to things just being not in line with this type of thing, so I'm waiting for the thing to.
Oh, you don't think you don't think we don't have a list a mile long of things we've been waiting on for you?
Well, that's probably true.
You're on vacation?
That's probably true.
I'm going to call you 5 days from now, Rich, and see if you have that same sense of tranquility.
I don't think I will. I mean, things have already started to pop up where it's like, okay, now we're getting back into the more chaotic life that I'm used to, but it doesn't feel as bad. I don't know if that's because of process or because of, the calluses that you develop over time and just you handle the stress a little bit better. But one way or the other, I'm a week away from vacation and I don't feel like everything's going to implode on top of me. So that's a good feeling. Okay, and as we're having this podcast, we're launching one of our largest sites and that's not stressing me out either. So I guess things are good. Whatever they are, they're good.
Excellent. And then I have a brand new mountain bike. So good. It's called a Ritmo from a company called Ibis. And I've been on it every single day since I got it, except for one. And so I've been loving that. And then I want to say, this is for you, Chris, actually, that I just have discovered that the coffee shop that I've been kind of poo-pooing because I felt like it was too urban for Mountainous Eagle turns out to have just such good coffee. Just so good. It's called Color Coffee and Eagle here. And I've been kind of looking the other way because we have another coffee shop called Yeti's that I'm pretty loyal to, and they have great coffee too. And I just didn't think that Color Coffee had the real mountain vibe, but I've been going there to meet a friend for before bike rides. And two things happened. One, I noticed, I recognize that ultra endurance runner on, and the huge picture on the wall. That's kind of cool and local. And then the other thing that happened was the barista guy was like, "Oh, hey, didn't I see you on Abrams Ridge riding your bike yesterday?" And it turned out yes, because he was bombing down the hill like so fast running. So I guess maybe it's legitimately pretty mountainy. So now I think I'm going to end up going there maybe even more often than Yeti's. It is very good. So there's my commercial for Color Coffee. But here we are, already having spent 5 minutes talking about other stuff. Let's talk about Docker. Let's talk about containers. And last week we talked about DockerCon. Chris was there. And, the tone last week was kind of like, Docker is a changed company. It's not the source of all new innovation in the container world anymore. But, that's not the only thing that happened at DockerCon. And some of the sessions Chris has said were very good. So this week we're going to dive in and we're going to go into a topic that we've been avoiding at all costs because I'll be honest, it's not our main focus at Kelsis. We definitely like to write secure software, but we are not a security company per se. But Chris is going to talk about one of the sessions related to security and Docker. So maybe launch us off somehow, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. One of the things I really do like about the DockerCon conference is that the actual breakout sessions, the technical content, is almost, it's across the board. It's top notch stuff. So the speakers that they have there, doing these breakout sessions are usually, just absolute experts. They, just really know what they're talking about and are able to go very, very deep technically, with very ranging from pragmatic information to like almost academic level treatment of the underlying technology. So this DockerCon didn't disappoint with that. I will say one of the hallmarks of DockerCon is that each one of these sessions is about 40 minutes long, and they probably cover 3 hours worth of material in that 40 minutes. And so it literally feels like you are drinking from the fire hose of expert knowledge that's just coming at you, and it's pretty fast and furious for the most part. So I did my best to kind of jot some notes down as I was attending these sessions. And as John mentioned, one of the sessions that was pretty interesting was around security as it relates to containers and how that might fit into your overall software development lifecycle. So this was a session called "Don't Have a Meltdown: 6 Practical Tips for Securing Your Container-Based Deployment." So obviously a little bit of a nod there to the Meltdown Inspector vulnerability issues that happened last year, I believe it was, near the end of last year.
Good memory. I would not have caught that, but maybe they mentioned it during the talk.
They didn't, but like, yeah. So pretty interesting there. Definitely very, very timely. Obviously security is a very, at the top of mind for anyone in the industry, that it's an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing concern and whatnot. So this was an interesting one. It was given by Justin Cormack, who is an engineer there at Docker, and also Liz Rice, who's a technology evangelist at Aqua Security. So one internal Docker person and one external partner giving this talk. And I've seen talks from Justin before. Justin is like a super hardcore technical guy. I believe he came from a company that Docker acquired that ended up becoming Docker Desktop for Mac. And so I've been to sessions where he's gone really deep into networking and actually security as well, and storage and device drivers and whatnot, and definitely very, very impressive on his breadth of technical ability. So this particular talk, what they did is they approached the topic of security kind of in a trying to make it analogous to a typical DevOps pipeline, and trying to line up basically like what you can do in every one of these stages of your pipeline from a security standpoint. So, they specifically talked about the 6 stages of that software development lifecycle, and how security applies to it. So the 6 stages are code, test, build, host, run, and observe. So these all kind of again align with like what we typically see in a life cycle, right? So your first stage, you're coding up your application, you're writing the code. What security aspects do you want to take into account when you're doing that? After you've coded, you're now testing. What can you do during that testing phase? Then you need to build your actual artifacts, your binaries. What can you do there? Then you need to run your code on host. How can you secure and harden those hosts? And then there's the actual execution environment itself. Like what kind of options or configuration are you going to do for actually running that container on that hardened host? And then finally, the observe is basically that kind of that ongoing runtime analysis of what's going on with your code, and what you can do as far as things like intrusion detection or anomalous activity type thing and whatnot.
Hey, this is Rich. You might recognize me as the guy who introduces the show, but is pretty much silent during the meat of the podcast. The truth is, these topics are oftentimes incredibly complex, and I'm just too inexperienced to provide much value. What you might not know is that John and Chris created the training product to help developers of all skill sets
get caught up to speed on AWS and Docker. If you're like me and feel underwater in these conversations, head on over to prodockertraining.com and get on the mailing list for the inaugural course. Okay, let's dive back in.
Question, Chris. Did they throw around the word DevSec at all?
In this particular session, I don't think they referred to that in particular.
Okay.
But I think I heard it periodically throughout the conference. But definitely, I don't think it's one of those things that kind of feels like it's still a bit new, and people are still trying to figure out exactly like what that means, as opposed to something like DevOps is something that's pretty straightforward now, and we've been living with that for a while, and just about everyone agrees what that means.
Right. Yeah, I just take this short tangent. I like the term because it sort of puts the responsibility of security back on developers, and it kind of ties into what I said at the beginning of this episode, which is, we're not a security company per se, but that doesn't mean we're not responsible for security. And it doesn't mean that we aren't held to, our feet aren't held to the fire for making sure that our software that we write is secure. So yeah, the talk itself seems to be about, teaching developers how to do things all the way through in a secure way.
Yep, absolutely. So it's again, it's the kind of pitch is these are the practical tips that you can do in every one of these stages of your software development lifecycle. And so maybe with that we can dive into that first step, which is the coding phase, if you will, and what kind of things you can do there. And so they specifically mentioned, pointed out, they kind of saw two main things you could do there. One is you could take advantage of code reviews, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And the other thing they mentioned was take advantage of static analysis tools. And this is the static analysis tool is definitely something that I think just about everyone building software is using, whether it be in the form of a linter, or sometimes doing metrics like code complexity metrics or whatnot. But they pointed out
GitHub's like suddenly starting to email everybody. They're doing their own static analysis on your code and letting you know about it, which is kind of, it's like a service to the world, really. Have you not been getting those from GitHub?
I have not received any emails now about that.
Oh, interesting. So I've been getting these. Are you seeing that too, Rich? I've been getting these
whenever we have
security audit updates. Yeah, like once a week I get a security audit update from GitHub that just goes through each of my repositories on GitHub and tells me what libraries are in there that have security vulnerabilities and what I should do about it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that'll actually in one of these later phases, I think we'll talk about probably that in a bit more, because there definitely is there's a difference between the static analysis tools that are actually looking at the code that you're writing, interpreting it, and trying to find patterns or idioms that may make it more vulnerable from a security standpoint. And then you have the kind of the module package scanning, or even binary scanning type thing, where there's published list of known vulnerabilities like CVE, the CVE list, and they'll go and you can do scans against that type thing. And there's lots of options in that space as well from a lot of different vendors. The thing that was interesting about this is that with the static analysis, again, most of the tools out there that we're used to are kind of more along the lines of linting or finding, kind of like enforcing code style, maybe sometimes finding like simple bugs and whatnot. They talked about a particular one called GAS, which is a static analysis tool for Go apps. And this one kind of was interesting in that it was actually looking for security, problematic code dealing with security issues, whether they be things like SQL injection, being vulnerable to SQL injection, that kind of thing. So it was definitely much more focus on security issues with your code, with your actual code that you're writing. So a pretty interesting tool. Again, unfortunately, it is for Go, and we are not really ourselves writing any Go apps, but it's something that's definitely on my to-do list to see if there's analogous tools out there for things like Node and perhaps Rails as well. So pretty interesting tool. Definitely go check that out.
Very cool.
And then the other, like I said, the other thing they talked about was code reviews, and definitely a firm believer in this. This is something that we do here at Calsys. Is we're pretty consistent with our code reviews, and have other folks on the team look at the code that's being committed, and kind of always keeping an eye towards like the security posture of that code and making sure that we are doing the right things. And so they just kind of reinforce this point that that's something that you definitely it's a good point, that's a good place to do that, and to kind of make that part of the culture, that when reviewing the code, it's not just for the, is it conforming to what the feature is supposed to do, or is it robust, but also like how secure is it? Great.
Yeah. I have a logic sandwich now that I always keep in my mind for code reviews, which is, you're so, it's either on one side, you're so smart that you don't need code reviews. Well, wouldn't somebody else benefit from your intelligence? That's the one side. And the other side is, you still have stuff to learn. Wouldn't you benefit from somebody looking at your code? Like, there's no winning. You can't be too smart or too dumb for code reviews.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So what's next?
So the next one is that, so now we've got through the coding phase, is now that, the next step would be testing. And so this is, I kind of talked about testing as it's not, in addition to doing maybe your unit testing or integration testing, this is, actually think of security testing as its own discipline. And so in one example they gave was, there's a tool out there called Test SSL. And, this is just a kind of a tool out there that helps automate, does a bunch of tests against code making requests over SSL, TLS, and it's looking to see what versions of TLS and that your code is allowing, right? So like, does it allow TLS 1.0, which is definitely vulnerable and your code shouldn't be using. So they gave this as just one of those examples of like, why not integrate this in with your entire process. It's like these tools exist out there, and treat security testing just as important as other forms of testing, whether they be unit or integration testing.
What was the name of that tool again, Chris?
It's called Test SSL.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically a drop-in for maybe is it also for Go, or is it a drop-in for kind of any environment?
No, this is actually, it's a collection of Bash scripts. And so you can find it's on GitHub. It's open source. It's actually been around for, I think, a long time. It's got a long, robust commit history to it. And so it's standalone, and it's totally language agnostic, right? Because it's this particular tool is testing the SSL and TLS protocols type thing. So it's just making connections, over those protocols to however whatever it is that you want to go and test. So very much agnostic to platform.
Super interesting. Of course, my mind immediately is going, can you wrap that into, your Circle CI testing pipeline, or is that something you have to do separately? It would certainly be nice if it could just run automatically.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's just a tool. You can think of it as, like you can absolutely, wrap it with a script of your own to kick it off and to configure it and whatnot. So there's absolutely no reason why this can't be part of your automated testing done by your CI platform, and just make it part of that thing. So just as we automatically run unit test and integration test, as we're doing our builds in Circle CI, you could also have another phase for now we're going to do our security testing. And so let's go run test SSL against, our node backend service type thing. So
right.
Of course, we do have a little bit of issues there, right? Because for us, it's kind of interesting because we do TLS termination with at the ELB since we're on AWS, right? So we're actually not doing TLS at our microservice level, although that's something that it's on the to-do list for us to change. So instead of terminating at the ELB, I think we want to go towards having being encrypted in flight throughout the entire data center and use private certs on our microservices. So once we do that, then this would be very applicable.
Yes. Okay. That's interesting. After just having spent a little bit of time kind of arguing with somebody that it's okay, we can terminate at the ELB, I'm interested to see how much extra work it is for us to not do that, and whether we can sort of streamline that and make it an easy thing to do for all of our clients. Because we certainly love, being able to use AWS certs and putting those in. Like you can't get them out of AWS, right? So putting them into your own code could be, onto your own containers could be tricky.
True. Yep. Mm-hmm. And as we've talked about before, AWS is constantly innovating. Their certificate manager now does private certs.
Yes.
So,
of course, I swear, we had this conversation 4 or 5 months ago, and that was not, maybe it was even longer ago than that because time seems to have compressed for me, but that certainly wasn't the case always. So I'm stoked. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we still have the problem, right? Like if you're running on Circle CI, you're not running inside AWS. So how do you get that private cert in?
Right.
So there's some issues there, but all those things are definitely doable. And I think there's a straightforward path for doing it without going through too many hoops, and it's all good. I mean, I think, having
it is more secure to terminate at the service instead of at the ELB. As much as you try to make a nice argument that terminating at the ELB is just fine, it's nice to have everything all the way to the code be encrypted.
Yep.
So maybe we can stop it there. We just finished talking about coding and testing from doing it the secure way, and next time we can move on to the other 4 things on the list.
Sounds good.
And thank you for your time, Chris, and thanks for your time, Rich. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Later.
See you guys. Mm-hmm. Bye.
Well, dear listener, you made it to the end. We appreciate your time and invite you to continue the conversation with us online. This episode, along with show notes and other valuable resources, is available at mobycast.fm/18. If you have any questions or additional insights, we encourage you to leave us a comment there. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week.